Forgive me if I sound a little off today, I've gone down with a bloody horrible seasonal cold. It's making me sound like a Hallmark narrator. Mariah's defrosting this month, it seems appropriate. But anyway. Some of you may remember that a few months ago I took a look at the Dramatic Capture series Nemesis Bridge Pack, and in it was a Netflix Soundwave repaint that I was less than impressed with. Sure, it wasn't bad, it's a pretty solid mould overall, but the inconsistent silver and grey paints bugged me. There were some build issues here and there, the light piping was abysmal, and it just looked so dark and gloomy overall. There was very little for me to enjoy with that release beyond the laser beak he came packed with. So, when pre-orders opened for Legacy United Soundwave, I jumped on it, mostly for the cassettes he came packed with, but also to give this mould another chance. And while by no means is this a perfect release, a lot of the places where my last excursion with this mould failed, this one succeeds. The sculpted detail and proportions on this figure are pretty solid. There are some parts that are a little inconsistent with the rest because they didn't get the siege detail stripped off during the remoulding stage, but oh well, what can you do? All the major details do look pretty great though. The knee panels, crotch buttons, tape door, and head are all very well sculpted and strike a really good balance of detailing. It's just when you get to the arms that the details fall a little flat. They just don't fit with the rest of the figure, both from the amount of detail on display here and the random nubs from the siege transformation that were never removed. The arms are fortunately my only real problem with the sculpting on this figure though. I do find his chest to be a little wide, but that's very ignorable. Just a minor issue for me. The thing that helps this figure stand apart from the previous copies, yes, plural, those versions will come later, is not solely the colour choices, but the consistency of the colours. The absolute lack of silver on the figure is a massive positive in my books, not only because the many intervals of unpaintable grey plastic match the paint near flawlessly, but also because the shade makes the figure look so much less gloomy. The vibrance of the figure has been lifted so much, and it's all the better for it. This looks great, and is admittedly helped by the gold on the tape door being a little brighter too. My only real problem with this figure's deco is the quality of the paint. The edges are really sloppily applied with all the grey. The red and the gold are both fine, but the grey is messy as hell, especially on the face. That's a real shame. I'd say the last thing the look of this figure has over the previous version is probably the light piping. It's not dramatically better, but it's still an improvement. Now, onto the accessories. The figure comes equipped with the Siege Soundwave set that I'm sure everyone's familiar with by now, a shoulder cannon with some missing paint that has an angling grip to mount next to his head, a similar looking weapon with a slide out barrel that looks great in Soundwave's hand and can plug into the back, and a long grey folding gun that doesn't really fit with the figure because it's definitely meant for Siege Megatron. All that stays the same, but the addition that this release brings is a set of 3 cassettes, and these make the figure a lot more fun. The biggest selling point for a lot of people with this figure is the first buzzsaw since I think Titan's Return, and it's a pretty solid take on the cassette form. There's loads of great paint on the wings, and the mustardy gold plastic here is a really nice shade. And out of the 3 here, this one fits most seamlessly into Soundwave's chest. Transforming buzzsaw is incredibly simple, although getting the head out could be a little bit of a pain if you don't have long fingernails. And then the buzzard, oh, I get it now. Mode works pretty well for the look, and the sculpting is really nice for the size. There isn't much in the way of posing, just the ability to look up and down. The jet booster on the back is a little bit wobbly and doesn't tab in, which is a shame. You can tab the feet into Soundwave's arm, but that can be pretty difficult to keep tabbed in. You might be better off folding the feet away and flipping out the 5mm post to plug him straight into the arm. Now, Ravage is the most interesting cassette here for me because I've never owned this mold before, and I've got to say, it's a lot more fun than some chatter I've seen about it has given it credit. The cassette mode here is fairly convincing, although the paint only being on one half is a little odd, but it does look pretty good in Soundwave's chest and fits almost as well as Buzzsaw does. The transformation is a lot more involved than Buzzsaw, with the panels working past one another and flipping out all over the place, leaving you with an okay looking Panther. Now yes, he's a little chunky, but I can't say I mind. Honestly, the only problem I have with the aesthetic here is how close the front legs are to one another, but overall I like the curvature of the body where they were able to present that with the different hinges. I like the head design, the little hip guns, it all works very well for me. It's just a shame that he can't pose more, only having some limited movement at the front and the back legs and some nodding at the head, but for the price these molds originally sold for during Siege, it's kind of understandable. Now, the Toy Colors Rumble is the mold we're most familiar with here, having put out a full review of the 86 mold at the beginning of this year, and this one is probably my second favourite behind 86 Frenzy, but there is one major problem here. I get that Hasbro are trying to silence the Rumble Frenzy debate by saying Rumble is definitively blue like in the show, but if this was the Toy Colors Rumble, he'd be red. These are Frenzy's toy colours. Hasbro, guys, you're just fanning the flames of fandom war. That aside, I am a big fan of this cassette mode. The glossy metallic purple is a very nice shade, alongside that dark sky blue, and the turquoise for the cassette printing really pops. This is my favourite cassette to have in Soundwave's chest, but unfortunately, it's the worst fit. Evan Brooks teased in an interview to expect an 86 Soundwave in 2026, so it'll probably fit better there. Transformation here is a pretty simple ball joint twisting affair, but the feet are very difficult to pry out, and the robot mode is nice and solid. There's not much I can say about this mold that I haven't said before. The sculpting is excellent for a figure of his size, his legs are a little long, the articulation is great aside from the lack of elbows, with the ball jointed head, shoulders and knees, and unrestricted universal hips. Flipping the hands away lets you plug in the pile drivers, which complete the look nicely, and the ends of them are on 5mm ports so you can extend them. The back guns have to parts form and can't store in cassette mode, which is a shame, but in robot mode they can plug into the arms or the back fairly simply. If there's one thing that I can say I'm hoping for the eventual 86 Soundwave, it's a decent compartment for storing the accessories of the cassettes in both robot and recorder mode, because that would make the rumble mold a lot more enjoyable for me. But that aside, the cassettes here do really lift up the fun factor of this figure. The party in a box playset feel is something that's been missing from the standard Soundwave releases for a while now, but with this array of cassettes, I feel like the figure really captures that type of enjoyment, and that helps the figure stand apart from figures like the Dramatic Capture version or the Legacy Blaster. Now, the posing on this figure is a bit of a mixed bag. There's a lot that's very average, some things that are exceptionally good, and some things that really could have been better. The head is on a very unlimited ball joint with loads of range. The shoulders move out, but there's a massive detent to them, so when they face down, they point slightly inwards, and their next option is like a 45-degree angle pointing out, which is a massive blemish on the posing here. It's also apparently a thing on every version of the Netflix mold. The shoulders can move all the way around pretty easily. There's bicep swivels, double elbows, no wrists. He has a waist swivel, which is a tiny bit looser than I'd like it to be. The hips move out really far to the side, and if you move the hip skirts, they can move out and back standardly. There's thigh swivels, standard knees, and finally some underwhelming ankle pivots. The posing here is mostly standard, with some moments that are really great. The double elbows help him push his shoulder button, that's a nice touch, but the kind of underwhelming legs and the exceptionally aggravating shoulders drag down the rest of the figure's posing. But I'm not too broken up about that, because while it is irritating, it's made up for by this figure being built far better than the Dramatic Capture version. That figure was pretty floppy and had a lot of difficulty holding poses. He was just no fun to handle, but the shoulder issue aside, the Legacy version is a lot of fun to handle. Solid win there. The transformation on this figure is extremely simple. There's not much to talk about with it. You flip some robot parts away, fold his legs up and cover any gaps with some panels. It's not the most satisfying thing in the world, and you're better off focusing on the tabs that go into the shoulders rather than the ones on the front of the torso when it comes to tabbing the legs in, but other than that, there's nothing to really make note of. And it leaves you with an okay cassette recorder. Now, I'll say right away that I like this more than the Dramatic Capture version, surely due to the consistent grey, but that aside they are practically identical. The sculpting on the front face is very simplistic, only having some light paneling which helps the buttons, tape door and colour placement stand out that much more. The little things like the second shade of blue present, the pin that's been disguised as a recording light, they're all features that liven this up that much more. You can of course still fit all the cassettes in here by popping the tape door open with the top button. Rumble still looks the best in my books, Ravager's paint helps sell him in there, Buzzsaw is a little less convincing than the others in this mode just due to the lack of cassette-like detail. The biggest problem with this recorder mode is just how uneven the surface is. There's a lot of different levels and panels that break the illusion if you look at the figure from any other angle than straight on, as a result of this figure being a partial of the Siege mold. It causes this mold to look less than stellar in my books, but I must admit, with the consistency of the grey, I do find it a lot less ugly than the DCS version. I think this mold just comes down to preference. Which version appeals more to your eye? Me personally, it's the United version, but I can see cases for all four versions of the mold, and I think to fully grasp the figure, we need to compare it to its predecessors.
Hello, I am a man in a box, and I am in constant pain. This is Netflix Soundwave. This is basically the same figure you've been looking at all this time, except it came out first, and it's worse for it. You see, during 2020, there was this really weird bug going around that apparently made it so that QC couldn't be done properly, and so we ended up with a brown and black Soundwave. Honestly, yeah, there's not much more to add to this. He comes with two cassettes. You've already seen them today. Outside of that, he looks a bit grubby and a very manky boy. I am not a fan. I don't have much else to add to this. Like I said, exact same figure, just dirty as f***ing not nice to look at. Anyway, I will now give it over to another man.
Soundwave San, one of my favourite figures in my Shattered Glass collection. Now, you know the deal here. Talking about paint and paint only. I don't even want to talk about this mould. I No. Starting from the head, nice shiny metallic blue with a lime green headband. Moulded detail, No painted eyes though. Now, some of you that have more than 2 functioning brain cells will work out that this is because of a light piping feature. Now, personally, I don't go around interrogating my figures with torches, but if that's your thing, then there you go. On camera and under this lighting condition, the metallic looks really nice. However, in person, it's a lot softer. I would actually prefer it if it was more shiny, like you see on camera. The only other bit of colour that you get on this figure is the nice reverse Decepticon badge. It's nice, and when paired with the laser beak sitting atop, it goes quite well. Now, as there's not a lot of paint to go over on the main figure, I thought we'd take a deeper look at the accessories. When extended, the blaster is a really nice metal-looking barrel, and 2 metallic stripes. The shoulder cannon, mind the stain, is the same thing, but with the stain.
This stupid bastard
Is okay. However, doesn't have a lot of detail. Laser bonk. In conclusion, this guy is okay. I have my issues with the mould, however the paint on this thing really bring it up. I would recommend it, only if you can be bothered to search for it, and if it's going to be worth adding to your shattered glass collection.
Now, I'm going to do my best to clear something up here. A lot of people are unhappy with this figure's price, because for 1 extra cassette on top of the original release of the figure, it is now bumped up to leader price. But I think something people are forgetting is Netflix Soundwave didn't release at Voyager price. It was part of the Netflix Voyager multipacks that were going at the same time, which retailed for $39.99 around here. Stick that in an inflation calculator from 2020 to 2024 and you get £49.20, £5 less than the cost of this figure, for an extra core class release in the box as well. Yeah, it's actually a value pack if you think about it. And despite being that leader price, the figure isn't actually advertised as such. It says Voyager on the official websites. The box doesn't have a size class attached. The only thing that indicated it as a leader were listings that were just price assessments for retailers, not a huge deal. For the price that this is put at, I personally call it worthwhile. I'd say this is the best release of the Netflix Soundwave mold, and honestly this would be my strongest recommendation of this year for a Christmas present. Not really my usual style of verdict, but the playset feel this box had has been loads of fun for me, and I could really imagine it'd be the same for a kid. Not a young one per se, there are some very small components for Rumble, but I'd say age 8 or so and up, or for a collector friend, this is a really great box set. And if you want to see some more Christmas recommendations, check out my channel for the last couple months' reviews. A lot of the figures in them are still on store shelves. And be sure to like, comment and subscribe to keep the videos coming. I'll catch you all next week with a look at a certain Marvel Comics warlord, and I'm gonna go and lay down and hope my sinuses empty themselves before I have to record the next one.